And Lauren Wobig is going to be talking as soon as there, and I've got it ready for you, Lauren.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Lauren Wobig. I serve as the director for the Office of Water Resources, in which our Lake Michigan program is housed for the state of Illinois. And thank you for participating this afternoon. We put together a brief overview of our diversion and allocation program, uh, really set to give a general overview, particularly for those communities that are looking at alternative water sources and considering Lake Michigan and participation in our program as one of their options. So want to just go through a little bit about the program this afternoon and what it's about and what it takes to become part of the family, if you will, of those using Lake Michigan water, and then what's required of an entity that chooses to use Lake Michigan water. So right here, as the slide shows, bottom line up front, that the Lake Michigan Water Allocation Program is really there to support community health and also development in northeastern Illinois. We are quite privileged as a state, among with other Great Lakes states, to have the Great Lakes as an available resource. And so all you have to do is talk to any of our western state friends and that are very challenged with providing water for their needs to realize how rich and blessed we are with the water that Illinois enjoys, including Lake Michigan. And so some points we're going to cover here, and I'll get into this a little bit more on my next slide, but the purpose of the program is to really preserve Illinois' right to continue to divert and use Lake Michigan water. And so therefore we carefully manage the diversion that is provided to us in order to provide that additional capacity of water when necessary for new allocations when communities are considering Lake Michigan water, and to accommodate community growth as that community goes forward with development. And then want to really hit on this fact that the program has that flexibility to address that growth as a community moves forward. And so with that, let us explain a little further. And Steve, if you could go to the next slide. And so this slide really hits on the need to understand the very precarious nature by which we're allowed Lake Michigan water. And so as shown on this map illustrated on the slide here, it shows all of those states and the two Canadian provinces that border our Great Lakes region. And the lighter gray area shows the watershed of the Great Lakes. What I really want to point out here, when you look at the watershed and the states and the watershed of the Great Lakes, is that Illinois has very little watershed, actually very little shoreline. I think about 68 miles or thereabouts in total compared to some of the other Great Lakes states. Yet Illinois represents really the largest population center and development that exists on the Great Lakes system. And so it makes us rather unique in that our demand and our need for Lake Michigan water is great, particularly in comparison to the watershed that exists in the Great Lakes Basin. And that has, as you might imagine, created some angst among the other states and provinces that we would be using so much. This, of course, goes back quite a ways in history, even back to when we, changed the flow of the Chicago River to go to the Gulf of Mexico. And so the state of Illinois was sued, I believe, originally by Wisconsin, and other states have joined in about our water use, which resulted in a U.S. Supreme Court decree allowing the state of Illinois to use water out of Lake Michigan, which, as will be explained here in a moment, predicated then some laws within the state of Illinois and our rules that we use to govern our program. But the key to note is that even today, the other Great Lakes states and the Canadian provinces watch Illinois very closely because of our use and being, in essence, that privileged child in the Lake Michigan family that gets to use that water, even though we have such a small watershed and such a short shoreline on the Great Lakes. And so, in many times, including I think even a couple of times during my career, other states have challenged that use of the state of Illinois to use that water. And thankfully, because of our programs, the state of Illinois has been able to prevail, and the U.S. Supreme Court has allowed Illinois to continue to have that diversion and operate the program that we're going to explain to you today. So always keep that in mind. It's the basis for why we require some of our requirements and why we run our program the way that we do. Next slide, please. I think you might have jumped slides there, Steve. Maybe not. Nope. I think we're good. So with that, we'll turn it over to I believe Jim Casey, who serves as manager of the program, to explain a little further about the rules and regulations that accompany that program. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Steve, to give to Jim. Thank you.
Hey, Jim, you should be all set.
Okay, my name's Jim Casey. I'm the chief of the department's Lake Michigan Management Section. As Lauren mentioned, Illinois' diversion is governed by a 1967 Supreme Court decree. That decree was modified in 1980, and it limits Illinois' diversion to 3,200 CFS based on a 40-year average. The Supreme Court decree is implemented using the department's Level of Lake Michigan Act. This act designates the Department of Natural Resources Office of Water Resources as the agency to regulate Illinois' Lake Michigan diversion. In order to regulate the diversion, our department uses our Part 3730 rules, allocation of water from Lake Michigan. Next slide, please. Illinois' Lake Michigan diversion is made up of three components: domestic diversion, direct diversion, and diverted runoff. Domestic diversion is the water used by public water supplies. We currently have 217 permittees which serve in excess of 8 million people in northeastern Illinois. Direct diversion is Lake Michigan water diverted into the Chicago area water system by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago for navigation and to keep the cause in the sanitary state. Diverted runoff is the amount of rainwater diverted from Lake Michigan by the reversal of the Chicago River. This is the one the other two diversion amounts are pretty stable, and we know what they're going to be ahead of time. Runoff it can vary from year to year. It can be, if we have a wet year, the number is large. If we have a dry year, the number is less. This number can be as much as 1/3 of Illinois' allowable diversion. Next slide, please. So any entity wishing to use water from Lake Michigan is required to obtain a Lake Michigan water allocation permit from our department. The purpose of the allocation program is to allow the department to manage Illinois' diversion and its compliance with the Supreme Court decree. Allocations are issued for periods of 20 to 30 years, and they're based on a yearly daily average. Ideally, a permittee's allocation would exactly match its water use over its lifetime. Permittees are allowed to exceed their allocation by an average of 5% over a 5-year period, or 115% in 1 year. We try not to build in any buffers into our allocations for drought years or peak day uses. The department has a non-revenue water or water loss standard of 10% of water supplied. This is used as a conservation tool to track and prevent excessive water loss by our users. Any permittee who exceeds that 10% standard is required to submit a water system improvement plan that they feel will, over time, bring them back into compliance with the department's 10% limit. When issuing new allocations or doing the reallocations, the department does not allocate for non-revenue water exceeding 10%. So if you're a community that wishes to apply for a new Lake Michigan water allocation, the first step is to approach the department for a pre-application meeting. This is highly recommended due to the fact that the allocation proceeding is a legal, process that requires a public hearing at the end. And once the application is submitted, that process begins, and we can no longer discuss freely outside the provision of a pre-hearing or the actual hearing, discuss the application with the applicant. So it's really important to come into a pre-application meeting. So once we've had our pre-application meeting and the applicant feels they're ready to apply, they need to submit an application which is provided by the department, and along with the supplemental report that backs up the information listed in their allocation application. After receiving the application, the department will complete its review and then contact the applicant to set a pre-hearing date. The pre-hearing needs to be noticed. The applicant is required to send a notice of pre-hearing to all our permittees. That notice is provided by the department along with mailing labels. As on the department's end, we will place a notice twice in a newspaper. At the pre-hearing, the department will go over the submitted application and possibly request additional information. And at that pre-hearing, we will set a date for a second pre-hearing if required, but more than likely, we would just set a date for the final public hearing. At the hearing, the applicant is required to provide a court reporter. And then at the hearing, the department will ask the applicant questions about their application in order to get it into the record. Once the hearing is over, the applicant needs to provide the hearing officer with a copy of the transcript of the hearing. Once the hearing officer has that transcript, he or she will then write an order either granting the allocation or denying it. Once the order is issued, if granted, the department will then issue a final permit. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to go ahead and unmute Jay Kesson here. He's unmuted. Are you ready, Jay? Jay? Are you there, Jay?
He shows that he's on, but he's muted.
Okay. You on now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, very good. Thank you. It's good to be here. So becoming a member of the Lake Michigan family of permittees connects you with a high-quality water source, as well as a group of over 200 permittees that share a responsibility for protecting the state of Illinois' right to divert water from Lake Michigan into the Mississippi River watershed. This responsibility is unique to Lake Michigan water users and requires each permittee to do their part to minimize water waste. Our Part 3730 rules require permittees to implement a conservation program. This conservation program includes reducing water waste by the end user, as well as ensuring that permittees reduce water loss in their water system to a level that is acceptable to the department. The Part 3730 rules require permittees to reduce non-revenue water such that the non-revenue water volume to water supplied volume is less than 10%. A permittee with a water system with a non-revenue water percentage that exceeds this value is in violation of the Part 3730 rules and requires the permittee to develop and implement a program to reduce non-revenue water to less than 10%. Now, Joliet is currently implementing their non-revenue water reduction plan, and as a condition of their allocation permit, they're required to reduce their non-revenue water from 34.5% in 2019 to 10% by 2030. These conservation plans are reviewed annually by the department, and updates to the plans are made as needed. Next slide, please. In addition to the conservation requirements, Lake Michigan water allocation permittees are required to provide water use data to the department on an annual basis. This data is provided on a form referred to as an LMO2, and that's Lake Michigan Order, is LMO. Now, currently, the data used to complete the LMO2 is developed by performing a detailed water audit using the AWWA's free water audit software, which is based upon the AWWA's methodology referred to as Water Audits and Loss Control Programs, or the M36 manual. Now, I mentioned Joliet as an example earlier. It's important to note that Joliet received an allocation permit that was based solely on its proposed demand. That is, the department has not commented on the state of Illinois' ability to accommodate additional communities within the Joliet region or any other area for that matter. Each community that applies for an allocation is considered individually. So Lake Michigan, as it relates to the Illinois diversion, is a limited resource. It is dynamic. Therefore, the decision to become a Lake Michigan water allocation permittee carries with it an ongoing obligation to work closely with the IDNR to allow the IDNR to control and regulate the diversion as conditions within the region change. As mentioned earlier, permittees will be required to implement conservation measures, and they will be regulated under the IDNR. Be sure to take this into account when you're considering the total cost of becoming a Lake Michigan water allocation permittee as opposed to utilizing other water sources where you have more autonomy. I highly encourage communities to contact the IDNR early in their planning process as they consider their various water source options to ensure that they understand the specific implications of becoming a Lake Michigan water allocation permittee. Next slide, please. Finally, the IDNR's role is to preserve the state of Illinois' right to divert Lake Michigan water. By carefully managing the diversion and regulating our permittees, we protect the state of Illinois' right to utilize Lake Michigan water in the near and distant future. Thank you.
All right. Well, now that we're done with the presentation, we can open it up to some questions. Go ahead and submit them through the chat. All right, from Chris. The water conservation explanation sounds like new applicants like Joliet will need to be at or below 10% loss by the time of implementation. What is the department doing to reduce existing members that exceed and have exceeded for years. Jim or Jay, do you want to answer that question?
Well, I'll take a stab at it. So all applicants are required, and actually all permittees are required to meet the non-revenue water requirement. The requirements are exactly that. They're requirements. They're not simply guidance suggesting that you do the best you can. So the success of the program really does depend on each permittee reducing water waste through the implementation of the required conservation practices that I just talked about. So we are aggressively moving toward working with each and every permittee to make sure that they can achieve that 10% or less goal. We've had over in the past few years, we've had over 1,000 education and outreach calls, and we've reviewed over 2,500 free water audit software permit submittals to help people achieve that goal, to help work with them to make sure that they can move toward that goal. So we're part of the team to help everyone meet that 10% or less goal.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Jim?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right. Keep on firing away if you get questions. All right. Then you got a response from Chris. Give it a couple minutes here. Thank you, gentlemen, for presenting today. There'll be these presentations, that the ones that we gave. Oh, Lauren's waving. These presentations that we've had, the ones in October and the ones that the two that we've had this week, are actually going to be on our website. Hopefully by early next week. We'll send a link to you. Just look on our webpage under Lake Michigan, this section. If you've got any questions, just let our staff know. You can either send it to me, you can send it to Jay, Lauren, or Jim. So, okay. Seth Lewis wants to ask a question verbally. Yes, I'll unmute you right now.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thank you very much for the presentation. My question was a little long to type, so thank you for verbally. As a representative in the DuPage County area, recognizing the value of Lake Michigan and Lake Michigan water, one, for businesses, are they able to request their own, or do they need to go through municipalities that are connected to Lake Michigan? And two, what are we doing to protect our resources from those outside, or what can I do as a representative outside the state or outside the Great Lakes region who may in the future want to tap into this valuable resource here in Illinois?
Jay or Jim, Warren.
So to the question of if individual businesses would need an allocation, there's a lot that goes with having an allocation. So it would probably be, I guess, more efficient or wiser to, if you were a business which had municipal water available to you, it might be easier just to become a customer of that municipality. We do have individual industries that have their own allocation, but those are usually outside the boundaries of an existing municipality. And then, Warren, you want to take the compact question? Can you unmute him?
Oh, I thought he was unmuted. All right, there we go.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. So a couple of things. That your question, Seth, is a good one about how do we preserve the water really in the region from outside sources, and that is exactly what drove the Great Lakes Compact and the creation of the compact by the Great Lakes states. I think at one point there was an effort to bring as oil tankers came into the Great Lakes, bringing oil from the Middle East. You know, the idea of, well, since oil and water don't mix, let's deliver water to the Great Lakes region, and then when we're empty, let's fill up these tankers full of nice, fresh, clean Great Lakes water and take it back to the Middle East. And once a company began to do that, that set up a lot of stirred up a lot of fury. Let's put it that way. And really, people realized that, hey, if we don't protect this resource, the world's going to come after it. So that's what started to drive the Great Lakes Compact. And today that compact exists for that exact reason, that it pretty much preserves that resource for those in the watershed. Now, some of the angst that happens against Illinois, as I mentioned at the beginning, is there's not that much watershed. So we actually are the only ones really kind of diverting it out of, significantly out of the Great Lakes watershed, other than some other areas in the Great Lakes where they're, you know, have some border communities that get Lake Michigan water, get water out of the Great Lakes. But that compact serves to preserve and prevent exactly that from happening. And so as you've heard about some of the western states or some companies that are looking to want to tap into Lake Michigan water or create a diversion out to the Colorado River or some other water source for the western states, the compact strictly controls that. Almost then to the point that other Great Lakes states, as they have communities that want to tap into for new allocations of water out of Lake Michigan, unlike Illinois, where we run our program to do that, an entity, say in Wisconsin or Michigan or Ohio, they have to get the approval of all governors of those 8 states to get that kind of water and make that petition request. So it is a very lengthy, very expensive process to do that, but for Illinois and our diversion and allocation program. And that's all set up and set into law by the compact that exists. Well, I have the floor. I'll follow up on the first question a little further as well, and that it's DNR's desire to try and create some additional resources to help those communities, as Jay mentioned, that have water system improvement plans where leakage exceeds our 10% limit, to get that leakage down. Some of the communities, particularly the disadvantaged communities, you know, struggle with going from, well, we'd like to do that, to awarding bid documents. And so we're working with the governor's office to talk about and try and develop a program that would help us step in to help all of our communities within the allocation family better track and better implement water system improvement plans. And particularly now that we have the Infrastructure and Jobs Act and some of the COVID Recovery Act dollars that are particularly aimed at water system improvements, there are dollars available potentially to tap into, not only for the planning purposes like I'm discussing, but then potentially for some of the construction purposes as well. So we really see some of the actions that Congress took just even this year being really a game changer in the world of water supply that we haven't seen for decades, that we hope to make a drastic, noticeable difference, not only in the state of Illinois, but in all the other Great Lakes states and provinces on our water conservation capabilities and stewardship of the water going forward. So kind of exciting times ahead, and some of these things are in the works to help us better conserve and preserve that water. Thank you.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the response. Preserving the Great Lakes is extreme importance to me as a legislator and to the citizens of Illinois. So if there's anything you need that I can help with, please let me or contact my office. Greatly appreciate it.
All right, thank you, our state representative. Do we have any more questions? No, we don't have a lot of folks on the call. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and go ahead and get off in the meeting. Thank you for everyone for coming. Like I said, the presentation and video is going to be on our website, and you'll be able to access it there along with all the chat and all that other should be able to be seen. So until then, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording, and then I'll end the meeting. Thank you, everyone.